It was just past midnight when someone knocked on my door. 3 soft knocks, hesitant, but urgent enough to make my heart race. I wasn't expecting anyone. I lived alone in a quiet apartment on the east side of Seattle, the kind of place where no one visits after dark unless something's wrong. When I opened the door, she was standing there. My boss, Isabel Grant, my 36-year-old CEO. She was drenched from the rain, her hair sticking to her face, holding her phone like she'd forgotten what to do with it. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Her lips trembled slightly, and she said, almost whispering, "I didn't know where else to go. I didn't ask questions. I just stepped aside and let her in." She walked past me, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. The smell of her perfume, subtle, elegant, mixed with the scent of rain. I closed the door and realized my hands were shaking. She looked completely different from the woman who ran the company like an empire. No confidence, no control, just exhaustion. I offered her a towel, but she shook her head. "I just needed a moment," she said quietly. "I made tea." It was the only thing I could think of. We sat at the kitchen table, the clock ticking between us. She looked around my small apartment, her eyes landing on the stack of unfinished reports I'd been working on for her. She smiled faintly. "You're still working? Deadlines don't wait," I said, half joking. She nodded, then stared into her cup. "Neither does life." I didn't know what to say. Isabel was the kind of woman people admired from a distance. Brilliant, sharp, untouchable. Everyone wanted her approval. No one ever got close enough to see the cracks. But that night, the cracks were all I saw. I was 24, fresh out of college, trying to prove myself in her world. A world of suits, pressure, and perfection. She was the reason I stayed late, the reason I cared so much about every line in every report. Not because she demanded it, but because she noticed. She made you want to be better. I had never imagined her showing up at my door. I asked if something happened. She hesitated, her eyes glancing toward the rain outside. "Do you ever feel," she said softly, "like you've built everything you wanted and somehow lost yourself in the process?" I didn't answer right away. I just watched her. This woman everyone saw as unbreakable sitting in my kitchen asking a question that sounded more like a confession. "Every day," I finally said. For a moment, our eyes met and something shifted. The air changed, not in a romantic way, but in that fragile human way when two people recognize the loneliness in each other. She smiled, small and tired. "Thank you, Lucas," she whispered. I didn't know why she thanked me. I hadn't done anything. But when she leaned back, closed her eyes, and exhaled, I realized that maybe what she needed wasn't help, just a place where she could stop pretending. 10 minutes. That's all it was. 10 quiet, fragile minutes. But they changed everything. Because from that night on, I could never look at her the same way again. The next morning, everything looked normal. Too normal. Isabel walked through the glass doors of the office with her usual calm confidence. Heels clicking, eyes steady, hair perfectly in place. No one would have guessed that 12 hours earlier. She'd been sitting in my kitchen, soaked and trembling. But I knew, and that knowledge made every second around her feel different. When she passed my desk, she paused for a heartbeat, just long enough for her gaze to meet mine. There was no smile, no word, just a look. Said, "Last night happened, but we don't talk about it." Then she walked into her office, the door closing softly behind her. All day I couldn't focus. Every email, every phone call blurred together. I caught myself staring at her glass-walled office, wondering if she remembered what she'd said about losing herself, about needing to stop pretending. She didn't look like someone who'd broken down. She looked untouchable again. At noon, an internal memo hit my inbox. Team leads meeting. 6:30 p.m. Executive Lounge. My name was on the list. I'd never been invited to one of those before. It was a big deal. For a junior analyst like me, it was almost unheard of. That evening, the lounge was filled with quiet tension and the scent of expensive wine. Isabel sat at the head of the table surrounded by board members and department heads. She didn't acknowledge me, but when I began my presentation, her eyes lifted. She watched me the whole time, not with judgment, but focus. Real focus. When it ended, she nodded once almost imperceptibly. That small gesture felt like a mountain shifting. After the meeting, most people left in clusters, laughing, talking business. I stayed behind to pack my laptop. Isabel was still there, standing near the window, city lights reflecting in her eyes. "You did well," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Thank you," I replied, trying not to sound nervous. She turned to face me fully. "I didn't mean to put you in an uncomfortable position last night." I shook my head. "You didn't. It was human." Her expression changed, a flicker of something like relief. She took a step closer. "Most people don't see me as human," she said quietly. "They see a title." "I don't," I said before thinking. We stood there for a moment. Too close for comfort, too far to step back without making it obvious. Her perfume, the soft hum of the city behind her, the reflection of rain starting again outside. Everything felt suspended. "Lucas," she said, almost a whisper. "You have potential, but be careful. Ambition makes enemies." She wasn't wrong because the next morning I saw Nathan, the company's CFO, and her ex waiting by the elevators. He smiled. That kind of smile people wear when they already know something you don't. "Late night at work." "Huh?" he said casually. I froze. He leaned closer. "Just watch yourself. Isabel's reputation has a way of dragging people down with her." That day, the office felt colder. Rumors moved fast, too fast. A few colleagues looked at me differently with that subtle curiosity that hides behind polite smiles. Isabel kept her distance. For days, she barely spoke to me except in meetings. I told myself it was fine, that it was better this way. But every time she passed by, I caught the faintest hesitation in her step, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. A week later, we had another business dinner. A client meeting at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the bay. She wore a black dress, elegant, but simple, professional, safe. But when our eyes met across the table, it didn't feel safe at all. After the dinner, everyone left one by one until it was just the two of us. The rain had stopped and the air smelled like the ocean. She walked to the railing, her hair moving slightly in the breeze. "Do you ever wish life were simpler?" she asked. I joined her all the time. She looked at me, really looked like she was searching for something familiar in a stranger's face. "That's why I came to your door that night," she said softly. "I didn't need help. I just needed peace. I didn't plan what happened next. Maybe it was the moment. Maybe the silence. Maybe the way her voice broke on that last word. But when she reached out and her fingers brushed mine, I didn't pull away. For a few seconds, the world disappeared. No titles, no rules, just two people who forgot who they were supposed to be. Then she whispered, "This shouldn't have happened." But she didn't move. Neither did I. And when her hand lingered in mine, warm and trembling, I knew something had already begun. Something neither of us was ready for. Rumors travel faster than truth, especially in an office where ambition smells like perfume and loyalty fades under pressure. By the next week, whispers had spread through every hallway. People spoke softer when I entered a room. Some smiled too kindly, others avoided me altogether. I didn't need anyone to tell me what they were saying. I already knew. It started after that night on the rooftop. Someone had seen us, or maybe just imagined they had in a place like ours. Imagination was enough to destroy you. Isabel acted like nothing was wrong. Meetings continued. Schedules stayed full. Her tone remained professional. But behind that perfect composure, I saw the same unease that kept me awake at night. Nathan, the CFO, was enjoying every minute of it. He had been waiting for something like this, a reason to question her authority to make her fall. He started inviting me to casual conversations, pretending to mentor me. I knew it wasn't advice, it was reconnaissance. One afternoon, he leaned across the conference table and said, "You know, Lucas, loyalty is a beautiful thing until it costs you everything." I didn't answer. I just stared at the folder in front of me. He smiled, tapping the table once before walking away. That night, Isabel called me into her office. It was late. The building was empty except for the two of us. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired coffee could fix. Her desk lamp cast a soft glow across her face. "They're saying things," she said quietly. "I know. I'm sorry." Her apology caught me off guard. She wasn't the type to apologize. "You have nothing to apologize for," I said. She looked at me then. Really looked as if she wanted to say something more but couldn't. "You should keep your distance for a while." She finally said, "It's safer that way." The words hit harder than I expected. Safer for who? She didn't answer. I left her office, but the silence between us grew heavier each day. She avoided eye contact. Emails replaced conversations. Meetings became cold and mechanical. The warmth that had once lived in those small moments. The glances, the smiles, the quiet understanding disappeared behind glass walls and company rules. Then came the article. A small business blog published a story about inappropriate behavior in executive management. No names were mentioned, but it didn't need names. The details were enough. The board launched an internal review. I was called into HR the next morning. They said it wasn't an investigation, just routine questioning, but I could feel the trap. Every word I said could either protect her or destroy her. So I said as little as possible. When they asked if we were involved, I told them no. It was the truth, and it wasn't. That evening, I saw Isabel leaving the office alone. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and chose not to. She walked fast, her head slightly down, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. For the next few days, I kept waiting for her to call me in to explain, to at least say something. But the call never came. Instead, I received an email brief, emotionless, signed with her initials. "You're being temporarily reassigned." Effective immediately, I packed my desk in silence. The office that once felt like a dream now felt like exile. No one met my eyes. No one said goodbye. Outside, the rain was falling again. The same kind of rain that had brought her to my door that first night. I stood under it, feeling the cold sting my skin, and realized how quickly a moment of connection could turn into a lifetime of consequences. When I got home, I found a letter slipped under my door. No name, no return address. Just my name written in her handwriting inside a single sentence. "I had to protect you even if it meant losing you." I read it 3 times before the words finally sank in. She didn't betray me. She sacrificed me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything. The tea, the rooftop, the look in her eyes when she said, "Safer that way." I wanted to hate her. I tried to, but all I could feel was the ache of something unfinished. Because love, I was learning, isn't always about being together. Sometimes it's about the silence that follows, the space between what you want and what you can't have. And in that silence, I realized our story wasn't over. It was just buried, waiting for the moment when one of us would be brave enough to dig it up again. Months passed, seasons changed, but her shadow stayed. I left the city soon after that letter. Took a quiet job at a small logistics firm near the coast, far from the glass towers and the whispers. Life slowed down almost painfully so. My days became predictable. Morning coffee, spreadsheets, silence. Some nights I'd walk by the water thinking about how easily one person can rewrite your entire life without ever meaning to. Isabel's name still showed up on the news sometimes. Mergers, board meetings, quotes, and business magazines. She looked composed, successful, untouchable again. I should have been proud of her. Instead, it just made the distance feel colder. One rainy evening, I came home to find an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, just a small embossed card inside. "If you still remember me, come to Harbor Street. Friday at 7:00 p.m. No signature, but I didn't need one. Friday came too fast. I told myself not to go. I told myself it was a mistake. But when the clock hit 6:30, I was already halfway there. The place was an old cafe near the pier, quiet, nostalgic, the kind of place people chose for goodbyes. She was sitting by the window, hair a little shorter now, dressed simply in a cream blouse. No guards, no assistants, no boardroom armor, just her. When she saw me, she smiled softly. "You came? I wasn't sure I should. I wasn't sure you would." We sat across from each other. The silence thick but not hostile. The waitress brought coffee neither of us touched. I finally asked, "Why now?" Isabel looked down, tracing the rim of her cup. "Because I'm done hiding," she said. "I sold the company." I blinked. "You what?" I walked away. The board wanted someone they could control, and I was tired of fighting. I realized I'd built a world where I didn't belong anymore. She looked up. "You were the only part of it that ever felt real." Her voice cracked slightly, and for the first time since that night at my door, she looked vulnerable again. "I thought you hated me," I admitted quietly. She shook her head. "No, Lucas. I saved you from me, from that world. I didn't want you to lose everything because of a mistake I made." I leaned back, trying to steady my thoughts. "Was it a mistake?" She hesitated, then whispered, "It was the most honest thing I've ever done." We sat there, time folding in on itself, the sound of rain against the glass like a metronome for everything unsaid. Finally, she reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. "I don't know what comes next," she said, "but if you still feel what I feel, maybe we don't need to know." I didn't speak. I just took her hand, felt the same warm, familiar, like home and danger in equal measure. After the cafe closed, we walked along the pier. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled like the ocean. The city lights flickered behind us, reflections stretching across the water. "I thought about you every day," she said. "I know," I replied, "because I did too." We stopped near the end of the pier. The waves were dark, endless. She turned toward me, her eyes catching the dim light. "I don't have power anymore," she said softly. "No company, no title, just me." I smiled faintly. "That's all I ever wanted." She stepped closer, close enough that I could feel her breath. "So what happens now?" I didn't answer. Words felt too small for that moment. Instead, I reached out and touched her face, my thumb brushing the edge of her jaw. She closed her eyes, leaning into the touch. Then she whispered, "I chose fear back then. Tonight, I choose you." Her lips met mine, not with urgency, but with the quiet certainty of something found again after being lost for too long. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the kind of kiss that fixes everything, but it was real and it was ours. We stood there in the mist, two people no longer running from what they felt. The world hadn't given us permission to love each other, but maybe we didn't need it. When she finally pulled back, she smiled through tears. "You were right," she said. 10 minutes can change everything, but so can one more chance." And in that fragile rain-soaked silence, I knew this time I wouldn't let her go. A year passed, not the kind that slips away quietly, the kind that rebuilds you piece by piece. Isabel and I didn't rush anything after that night on the pier. We started small. Morning calls, long walks, unplanned dinners. For once, we weren't CEO and employee. We were just two people learning how to exist without the walls we built around ourselves. She opened a small consulting firm downtown. Nothing flashy, just a handful of clients, a sunlit office, and a new kind of freedom she'd never had before. She offered me a position not out of obligation, but because she said she trusted me. I accepted, not because I wanted to work for her again, but because I wanted to build with her, and together we did. The company grew slowly but honestly, without the noise, without the shadows. People began to see the Isabel I always knew, human, flawed, brilliant in ways that couldn't be written in a report. Nathan tried to come back once. He'd heard about her new business, tried to buy into it, called it a smart investment. She smiled politely, told him she no longer did business with ghosts. That was the end of it. Somewhere along the way, the whispers stopped matching. Maybe people just got tired of the story. Or maybe they finally saw that what we had wasn't scandal, it was survival. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We argued about work, about past mistakes, about how hard it is to separate love from fear when you've both been burned before. But every time, no matter how tense it got, we found our way back to each other. One evening about a year after that first knock on my door, we stayed late finishing a project. The office was quiet, bathed in the amber glow of the city outside. I was sitting at my desk when she appeared beside me holding 2 cups of coffee. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. I looked up. Every day she smiled faintly. "I don't regret it anymore." I took the cup from her hand. "Good, because neither do I." She sat beside me, her gaze drifting toward the window. "You know," she said softly, "I spent years chasing everything they told me mattered. Titles, awards, control. And the moment I knocked on your door, I lost all of it. But somehow that's when I finally found myself." Her words settled deep. I reached over, intertwining my fingers with hers. "You didn't lose everything," I said. "You just traded it for something real." She turned toward me, her eyes shining in the dim light. "Something real," she repeated, almost like a promise. Silence filled the room, the kind that doesn't need words. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Outside, the city pulsed with life, unaware of the quiet story unfolding behind the glass. Later that night, as we locked up, Isabel paused by the door. "You remember what you told me that first night?" she asked. I frowned slightly. "What did I say?" "You said, 'Every day feels like you're losing a little bit of yourself trying to keep up with the world.'" I nodded slowly. She smiled. "You were wrong." "Oh yeah." She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't lose yourself. You just hadn't met the right reason to stop running." I didn't answer. I just kissed her softly, steadily, with the kind of certainty that comes when you finally stop questioning what's real. Months later, our office wall held a single framed quote. Isabel had printed it out and taped it there the day our first big client signed on. It read, "Sometimes the door you're afraid to open is the one that leads you home." People would ask about it and she'd just smile. Only she and I knew what it really meant. Because that knock at midnight, those 10 minutes that changed everything, weren't the start of a scandal or a mistake. They were the beginning of something fragile, flawed, and real. And now when I look back, I don't think about the rumors or the losses or the fear. I think about that quiet moment in my kitchen. The sound of rain, the tremble in her voice, the way she said she didn't know where else to go. I understand now. She didn't come to escape her world. She came to find a new one.